to the Thought Snob Podcast. I'm Paula Swope. Let's get snobby. My thought snobs better strap on their seatbelts today because I'm sitting here with David Waldy, the fierce empathy coach. Now, David is not only wildly successful in business, having worked with power players like Tony Robbins, Russell Brunson, and many more, but he also has a personal story that needs to be heard. After nearly taking his own life and experiencing a divine wake-up call, David left his corporate career to reinvent himself. And he's here to talk about how he successfully cultivated a life filled with greater peace, purpose, passion, and profit, all without sacrificing his family, health, or well-being. David has worked with entrepreneurs and leaders from over 40 different countries to help people reclaim their power, just as he has. So, David, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Paula Swope, it's an honor, my friend. I'm excited for our conversation. It's so good to see you.
Same here. I cannot wait to kick this off. And I don't know if you know this or not, but you are a bona fide thought snob because thought snobs, they don't settle. And we usually arrive at this point in our lives the exact same way that you did, and that is through a divine wake-up call. So I want to dive right in and talk about that because I am highly intrigued, impressed, and mesmerized by your story. So in 2018, not that long ago, you had a wake-up call. And you said you had it all, like based on society's definition of having it all. But you found yourself standing in front of the mirror holding a gun. Okay. So everyone experiences that moment when they either decide to start living or start dying. Okay. And so would you say that was your moment?
Well, it was definitely my moment, Paula. It was a culmination of a series of events that, I was standing in the bathroom and I was just playing all the stories in my head that everyone I knew would be better off if I wasn't here. The pain would go away, that my wife and only had one at the time, my daughter would be better off with life insurance money. And so it was a lot of cognitive dissonance, mental chaos, and just emotional, just complete overwhelm. And it all came crashing to a head over a series of events that I'm sure you're familiar with. We go through these series of events, just painful after painful after painful. And you kind of come to this point where you either accept it for what it is and give up, or you dig in deep and you find something way down deep inside and say, no more, no more. I'm going to make the changes. And so, yeah, we can start wherever you want. There's a lot there.
And I just want to point out, I wanted to kick off with that question and that information because, people are listening to us. And the goal of my podcast is for us to leave people in a better place after they listen than they were when they tuned in. And with someone like you, just taking, a glance at you, watching you work, listening to you speak, people tend to make these assumptions. And, people would take one look at you and be like, well, this David Waldy cat guy, I mean, he's got it all together. I bet, he's just been, smooth sailing for him, his whole life. And then you learn that you've been through all of this traumatic stuff.
Yeah.
But you turned it into something not only beneficial for you, but for other people. And so in that moment when you got that, that divine wake-up call, you said that, I think I read somewhere, you said that, God spoke to you.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So for us to have the context, we probably need to go back a ways, because I think that it's really important for all of us to understand that our story is, it's still being written. If you're here listening today, you hold the pen and you have so much more control than you think that you do. And that's really where, if we go back and we look at our childhood, we look at our upbringing, we look at society, we look at the culture we grew up in, we look at any religious affiliation, we look at our parents, and there is there's this beautiful section in a book that I love that's called The Shack. And it's this point where Mac, the main character, is contending with this unspeakable pain where his daughter has been taken and murdered. And he's
Mhm.
trying to figure out who to blame. And he goes through this process, and eventually you go back far enough and we can look back at our parents, we can look at the pastors, the priests, or the gurus, or we can look at society, we can look at the government, we can look at all these things, and we just look for, why am I the way that I am? Why is my situation like this? Why is my health like this? What did I do to deserve this? Life's not fair. Why is there never enough money at the end of the month? Why is it that my relationships are fractured and disconnected? Why do I feel emotionally dysregulated? Why does every single day feel like crushing overwhelm? And you go back far enough, and you get to a point where there's no one else left to blame but God.
Mhm.
You go to the very beginning, like, God is to blame. And in this story, that so resonates with me is that I went through this process of trying to reconcile all the things that had happened to me and all the things that were injustices and wrong. And I came to a point where I started to realize that I had so identified that I had effectively adopted what we oftentimes refer to as a victim mindset,
Yeah.
is that I was the victim of circumstances, of situations. If only I had better parents, or if only I
Mhm.
had, grew up in a different town, or if only this hadn't happened. And then for me, what that looked like was I grew up just outside of Topeka, Kansas. So farm country. For anyone that is a Superman fan, yes, yeah, I grew up down the street from Clark Kent. He taught me how to fly. It's pretty awesome. And
Nice.
it was a beautiful, a beautiful childhood of living in the country. My childhood experience was very much like the Andy Griffith Show. I was Opie Taylor. I was a kid. Give me a fishing pole and a BB gun and send me on my way. Like that was
Mhm.
my childhood experience. And my dad was a veterinarian. Mom was a teacher, and so we were lower middle class. I didn't have anything to compare to. We really don't use that language until you become an adult. Your childhood is just your childhood. Like
Mhm.
you don't really have much to compare to other than maybe your friend's house or whatever. Like, they got a pool, what?
Right. Mhm.
and and so I grew up just like all of us do, living life, right?
Mhm.
And you try and do a good job. And I bought into what everyone was selling, which is go to school, get good grades, graduate, get a good degree, get a good job, and you'll be happy. You'll be successful and you'll be fulfilled. And so the first rift that happened was just before I turned 14 years old, and all this is kind of just that context to get us to that moment in the mirror, and then what's happened on the other side of that is that just before I turned 14, my parents told me and my younger sister that we were moving from Kansas to Florida.
Mhm.
Now they sold it to us as we were going to be closer to Mickey Mouse. So I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, let's go. This is going to be awesome.
Right.
But little did I know it was their last ditch effort to save their marriage.
Mhm.
It was they needed a complete shift and change. We moved to just outside of Tampa, Florida. No family, no friends, no connections, just
Mhm.
literally this random spot that they picked. Um, and so that transition for me was one where I felt like, my childhood ended because I had no more friends. I didn't know anyone. And immediately upon moving, within like the first year or two, my parents separated for the first time. And so there was this part of me as a kid, especially as a young man, where I felt like I felt abandoned. I felt like my dad walked out on my family. I didn't understand the full context. Obviously, as kids, we don't. Um, but I felt like my dad walked out. And so I got really plugged into our local church. I started getting actively engaged and involved with every single thing that I could at school, chorus and drama and sports. And I wasn't a part of any of the cliques, but I was in all of the cliques, if that made sense. I was friends
Mhm.
with everybody, anyone. And I didn't realize that because of a lot of the pain that I was going through, I learned from a very young age how to wear masks. and I learned how to
Mhm.
be exactly what
Yeah.
everyone says you're supposed to be so I could fit in and be approved and be
Mhm.
okay. And so my life just became enveloped with, it was just a to-do list. Everything was a task. And during that season, because of my dad and mom separating, there was a man who kind of took me under his wing. He was my youth pastor at church. And it wasn't until probably about a decade later that I learned about this term called grooming.
Mhm.
And over the course of about a year, I ended up getting molested by this man,
Mm. Mm.
taken advantage of. And it was not only identity crisis for a teenage boy, but everything that I thought about what manhood was, my entire paradigm was completely destroyed because the two men that I most respected and loved in my life, one I felt had abandoned me, and the other one took advantage of me.
Mhm.
And so my understanding of manhood and identity and all these things like was just completely screwed. And so what did I do? I did what many of us do. You just throw yourself into just keep moving forward. And so I worked my butt off. I got good grades. I graduated with a 4.7 GPA. I ended up having a full ride academic scholarship to go to any university in the state of Florida that I wanted to. And I told my parents, I'm not going to college.
Yeah.
They lost their minds because both of them had worked extraordinarily hard to. My mom was the first one in her family to go to college, and my dad was the first one in his family to get an advanced degree. And so I told them, I said, I'm moving to South Carolina and I'm going to this internship program where I want to learn about leadership development. I want to learn about interpersonal communication. I want to learn how to more effectively navigate my strengths. I want to learn about myself. And so this little program was called South Carolina School of Leadership, and it all more or less, Paula set me on my path to becoming a pastor. There was a ministry affiliation. And so I started taking some Bible college classes, very quickly found out that I did not want to become a pastor, still love the church and love my church. But uh, it led me into my entire 20s, what I would consider to be the dark ages. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what life was all about, but I very quickly became successful doing what everyone said you're supposed to do. I built my career in the corporate world in sales, eventually learning marketing. I ended up with the glass corner office, the company car, the six-figure salary, the house, the car, the wife, the kid, everything short of the white picket fence. That was something I was planning on
Mhm.
building. I just didn't have it. And
Yeah.
so my life was very much built around this paradigm that says, this is how you're supposed to win in life. And it led me to a point where that series of events that led up to 2018. I'm only 33 now. I still feel like I'm a baby. Um, this 6 years ago, there was three distinctive events that happened. One is I had saw some stuff going on inside the company, and I came out about it and said what was going on behind the scenes was unethical, immoral, wrong, like not okay. It ended up blowing up in my face. I had a $40,000 pay cut. I was stripped of my title. I was basically put into a position that I did not want. My entire income was capped and limited. And I was literally told to my face that the only reason that I was still at this company that I had generated millions and millions and millions of dollars for
Mhm.
was because I was too much of a financial asset for them to lose at that moment. That what I was producing for them was too much to justify firing me, but that they literally were just waiting for my replacement. Within a month of that conversation, my wife and I went through a miscarriage, and I ended up having a panic attack driving down the interstate going about 80 miles per hour and almost wrecked. And it was that moment in the truck when I almost wrecked where you can imagine the most flowery pirate language on earth.
Mhm.
And I did worse, cursing
Mhm.
God, saying,
Mhm.
why am I this way? I have done everything everyone has said to be. I'm the nice guy. I'm kind. I'm always giving. I'm always serving. I'm always pouring my heart out. Why won't you tell me why I'm here? What is my calling? What is my purpose? Who am I? Who am I? And Paula, just for final context on this, I was about 60 pounds heavier than I am right now. I was working 70, 80 hours a week. I was dealing with constant suicidal ideation, anxiety from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to bed. And I ended up coming to this point where it was, I'll never forget, it was a Sunday afternoon. My wife and daughter had left. They were at church doing some stuff. And I remember being in my room and just seeing my little gun safe and thinking, you know what? No one's here. I need to, I need to be done with this. I can't live this way any longer. And that was the moment where I believe without a shadow of a doubt that God intervened. He said some very clear things to me. I didn't hear them audibly. I felt them in my bones. And that moment is when everything started to shift. And you would think that the story gets better from there. It just got worse and harder. And I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah. I just that is incredible. I mean, in just I mean, 15 minutes of you talking, I have so many things to say. And you're only 33 years old. And oh my God, everything that you've been through. I mean, some people go a lifetime and they don't experience that kind of tragedy. And then some people just, crumble under the smallest amount of pressure. And everything that you went through is really what I refer to as a universal uprooting. It's like that old saying, the darkest hour is just before the dawn. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but you talk about the chain of events, okay? And everybody goes through that, I think, especially people who are destined for greatness. Everything has to absolutely fall apart in order to get you to where you are supposed to be. And do you feel like that is the case with you? I know that's the case with me.
Absolutely. It's true. And I think it's really hard for us to stomach that because
Mhm.
when you so associate with your past, which is all that our subconscious, I know, Paula, you obsess on this stuff as well, as that who we are today, how we see life, our paradigm, our perspective, um, our general way that we perceive life, how we look at life, and how we filter things, all of that has been programmed based on our past. It's our experiences, it's the pain, it's the heartbreak, it's the betrayal, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? It's
Mhm.
all of it has conditioned us to see the world the way that we do.
Mhm.
And when you see the world the way that you do, and you're trying to make the changes, you're having to effectively pretend and
Mhm.
become, yeah, I like the word that you use, you become delusional
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
you're having to think about a future that does not in any way, shape, or form look like what you've experienced. It
Mhm.
seems completely unattainable, it seems completely unrealistic. And the irony is that the reason we feel like it's delusional is because our subconscious mind says that's fake. That is not who you are. That is not your reality. That is not possible or accessible to you. And because it's unfamiliar, your subconscious mind just says that. It says, because that's unfamiliar, I'm not familiar with it. It's not normal. And by extension, it's not safe. And so
Mhm.
your subconscious mind will do everything within its power to keep you held back from that reality simply because it labels that as dangerous because
Mhm.
it's the unknown, right?
Right.
For me, that's exactly what happened. I had to go through this process of learning how to shift my perspective to being fully present and future oriented instead of so immersed in the past and allowing all of the emotion and baggage to dominate my present reality.
Mhm. Well, I can tell you that my subconscious beliefs were like so deeply embedded that looking back, it's abundantly clear to me that I was basically on autopilot for the first 3 decades of my life. And it sounds like you were too.
Mhm.
And just completely unaware and really operating like a robot. And but I had kind of, I mean, I had there was no kind of to it. I had been socialized to believe that I really kind of had to act like a robot, just to make things work.
Yeah.
And so, and I had to really rewire my brain. I had to train my brain to
Mhm.
think differently. And you talk about this a lot in your videos on social media, which is one of the topics that really, attracted me to you. I mean, I was captivated by everything that you said. And I would love for our listeners to hear your take on this because I really did have to unlearn everything that I had been taught. And so I know what the process looked like for me, but I would like for you to talk about how does a person rewire their brain and what can they expect to happen during this process?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. And I think the reason that this is so challenging for us, Paula, and it was challenging for me as well, is that these aren't concepts that we were taught, right? Even if you look at just basic, simple things like how to file your taxes and what is
Mhm.
investing and like certain aspect, like we weren't taught this in school. And if you didn't have parents who taught you how to regulate your emotions, how to understand, how to effectively communicate what you want and what you need,
Mhm.
all these different little things. Like there was no handbook, and we weren't taught it in school. We were taught how to do 1 plus 1 and make sure that we spelt all our words correctly, right?
Mhm.
Maybe throw some science and some other stuff in there that I think can be all useful, but it's very contextual. Is that for me, education, the education that I now am obsessed with, and I have been obsessed with for really the last 6 plus years, is behavioral psychology,
Mhm.
neuroscience, interpersonal communication, and emotional intelligence. And
Mhm.
so those things have become an obsession to me, not because I've wanted to try and educate people, but simply because I was looking for answers for myself. And I started to realize that, conjoin those with my natural strengths and my natural
Mhm.
giftedness and my propensities and the things that I'm interested in. And I've realized that the reason so many of us are stuck is simply because no one told us, and we just got conditioned and programmed just like everybody else
Mhm.
to believe that this is how you become happy and this is what makes you fulfilled and this is what success is supposed to look like. And so for me, what I started to do in this study of rewiring the brain is I wanted to get, I love Elon Musk operates this way as well. For those who know Elon Musk, founder of Tesla and PayPal,
Mhm.
he operates from this way of thinking called first principles.
Mhm.
And so first principles in effect is where if you look at something complex, imagine you've got a Lego set, right? All of us have this Lego set that we have been given. It's this bundle of Legos, right? And you open it up and you're super excited because you get to build something really cool. The only problem is you're not given an instruction manual. Every one of us are given this Lego set and they're like, oh, sweet, this thing looks amazing. It's going to be awesome, right?
Mhm.
And you open it up and you're like, but wait, where's the instruction manual? And there's no instruction manual. And so then what do we do when we're kids? We look at our
Mhm.
parents and we look at society and we look at those that inspire us and we read the books and we listen to the podcasts. We go to the conferences and we look at all these other people's models. We say, maybe I can make mine look like theirs. I need to
Mhm.
make it look like theirs. And so we start constructing our lives and we start building these things. And then you get to a point where you have it and you look at your life, you're like, I mean, there's something there, but it doesn't, I don't feel like it's supposed to be this way. I feel
Mhm.
like there's something more. I feel like I'm missing something. And so instead of being very intentional with coming up with our own version of what we want it to look like, we look external and we say, oh, well, they drive this kind of car. So that's what I want. They
Mhm.
live in this type of house. So that's what I want. They do that for a career. So that's what I want. And we start taking all of these little pieces and trying to make ourselves look like everyone else. And
Mhm.
so one of two things is going on. On one hand, that comparison that we make can be useful because we can be inspired to become better. Like we can't
Mhm.
be inspired unless we compare. But
Mhm.
you hear this all the time, comparison is the thief of joy. It is, but it's also not. It just depends on your mindset. If I compare, like everyone listening, if we compare to Paula, she can inspire us and say, oh my gosh, she is doing this and this and this and this and this. I want to follow in those footsteps. How do you believe? What do you think? Like, what are you doing, Paula? And help me understand because I want to follow. That is a comparison.
Mhm.
Or we can look at you, Paula, and be like, oh, look at her and her fancy studio and her life and her husband and this and that and all
Mhm.
that she's done. And it does steal our joy. And so when I started breaking down this thing of how do I rewire my brain, I was trying to get down to first principles. I was trying to take that Lego set and why don't I just break the thing and start over
Mhm.
and build
Mhm.
what I want to build? And the reason that so many people struggle with and they construct Or if we're going to use our minds, we have a mental construct of what things are supposed to be or not supposed to be. If we would simply take the time to capture a vision and visualize the reality that we want, the Lego set that we want to create, you'll start to identify, oh, wait, no, 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 no. I'm not trying to just be like everybody else and take their ideas, and like I can be inspired and encouraged, but what do I want this to look like? And it starts to answer the question that we all ask: what do I need to do to fix my health? What do I need to do to fix my marriage? What do I need to do to fix my mindset? What do I need to do? What do I need to do? What do I need to do? And
Mhm.
although that's a useful question, those are useful questions. They're the wrong first question, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yep, I agree.
The first question is, who do you want to become?
Mhm.
Because when you can define the Lego set outcome, what you want to create, then you start to realize, oh, no, no, this part needs to go here and this part needs to go here. And I need to go have a conversation with this person over here and be inspired. I might actually need to trade something in exchange for what they have because I need another piece that I don't have.
Mhm.
And so, this process of stripping things down, the example that I love to use outside of that Lego set, and you've probably heard it before, is you imagine, this is my Kansas farm boy coming out. You imagine every day you wake up, you go out on your porch and you jump on your tractor and you drive that tractor 2 miles out to the field where you're planting corn and doing your work, right? And every
Mhm.
single day you get on the same tractor, you drive the same 2 miles. Over time, we start to formulate ruts in the road, right? You
Mhm.
do that after 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, a couple years, and those ruts are going to be really deep to the point where you can jump on that tractor, steer it down the road, and let go of the handle. You don't
Mhm.
have to hold the steering wheel anymore because the ruts are so deep. It's just, you just hold your foot on the gas and you'll get there. You'll get exactly
Mhm.
where you've gone every single day for the entire scope of your life. And so,
Mhm.
for us to make the change, the reason it's so difficult is because we have to take back control of that steering wheel and realize that just a 1% correction for anyone that's ever driven four wheelers or a tractor or anything, or just been in
Mhm.
ruts, getting out of ruts isn't just like, let me just lightly turn the steering wheel. No, you got to like yank that thing out. Even though it's a 1 degree turn, you got
Mhm.
to say, like, I'm going to shift. I am going to change. I'm going to do something different. And that 1% correction, and it's the hardest at the beginning because you've got to get up over that giant rut, right?
Mhm.
If you made a 1% correction and you made that 1% correction every single day for 3 months, for six
Mhm.
months, for 12 months, you will literally carve out a whole new rut that will cause you to end up at a completely different location. And over time, that old rut, those old ruts will start to wash away with life and
Mhm.
experience, and things like that happen. And so, for us to rewire our brain, what we have to do is we have to recognize that it starts with one of two things. You either brute force it, which I don't recommend. It's very hard to force yourself to do the things you don't feel like doing because you're not going to feel like doing any of this.
Right.
Or you use suggestion. You have to suggest to your subconscious mind that this new location that you want to get to, the new results you want to create, the new version of you that you want to become, the marriage you want to create, the financial situation you want to create, the legacy that you want to create, you have to mentally visualize that and make the 1% correction every single day, doing different than your default habits. And over time, your subconscious mind finally familiarizes itself with this new version of you. And it says, you know what? You've been thinking about that so much, Paula. Maybe that's the real you.
Mhm.
Maybe this version of David Waldy, of Paula Swope, right? Maybe what if, what if this version that I've been operating in is actually the fake one?
Mhm.
What if that's really the real me? And the reason I feel the way I feel, the reason I'm self sabotaging, the reason that I'm beating myself up, the reason that I think I'm not good enough, the reason that I think I'm always going to be a failure, I'm never going to be successful, and I can never have that. What if the whole reason I'm feeling that is because I am not this version?
Mhm.
That version is me. And so
Mhm.
that rewiring process, we can get as nerdy as you want. It effectively starts with, you have to decide what you want the final product to look like, your Lego set, what you want it to
Mhm.
look like. Because guess what? There's no instruction manual and you're free to decide.
Mhm. Okay, so that is really exactly the way that I did it, and I have so many comments here, and so when I was on autopilot and my subconscious was running the show and I didn't realize it, okay? I didn't even really think about who it was that I wanted to become. But what I did do was I constantly compared myself to people that I was jealous of. And I was eaten alive by jealousy.
Yeah.
And I was taught to be jealous of people.
Mm.
Like I was taught that God actually blesses some people and doesn't others.
Mm.
Now, how ridiculous is that?
Mm.
And so I went through life thinking, well, this is just the way it is because
Mhm.
God has decided to bless this person and not me. And that's why my life sucks. And it
Yeah.
goes back to the blaming God. I mean, I used to get really mad at God and would like
Oh, yeah.
personify God. And it was just ridiculous. And so the first thing I did, and I remember how uncomfortable and cringy it felt, but when I nailed it down and said, okay, this is who I want to become, it traced back like the qualities that I had been jealous of in other people. Well, they had something that I wanted.
Yeah.
So why would I be jealous? I switched, I made a shift, just that 1%,
Yeah.
shift. Probably more than 1% with me though, because man, I was hard headed.
Some of
But
us
I,
need a 90-degree turn. Like you
Oh
gotta
my
go
God, I did, like, immediately, but I made that shift from not being jealous, but being inspired, admiring those qualities and seeing how I could get those things, and so I switched from, a state of being a jealousy to a state of learning,
Yeah.
and that's one of the first things that I did to start rewiring my brain and to start, putting belief systems into my subconscious that were empowering because everything that I believed about myself was the opposite of empowering. And I was absolutely not taught about any of this growing up,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah.
Nobody mentioned mental health. Nobody mentioned the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, the unconscious. Nobody talked to me about that stuff.
Yeah.
I had never heard about the spiritual laws until I was in my late 20s and Wayne Dyer came into my life and changed my whole world. And I don't know if it hadn't been for him, oh my goodness, I don't know what would have happened. But I have to say before I go on to our next question, you talking about the reality that you're living in, maybe that's not you, and maybe what, this is actually who you're supposed to be. When I started envisioning my ideal life and I had nailed down exactly who it was that I wanted to become,
Yeah.
I would spend like an hour every day envisioning that. And that was the only hour of my day that I felt any positive feelings at all. It was the only time I created any good energy at all. And it
Mm.
gave me hope.
Yeah.
And it's like the first time that I had like felt hopeful and excited in a long time is when I was envisioning another life.
Yes.
Well, it got to the point that when I would come out of my envisioning sessions, as I call them, I didn't feel like I belonged in my physical reality.
Mm.
And I noticed that when I felt like, and it took me a while. I mean, it took me at least I'd say a year or longer to start to feel that way.
Mm.
But when I felt that way, things started changing,
Mhm. Mm.
and things started changing pretty fast.
Yes.
And one of the things that I noticed first, and it wasn't such a subtle change, some of the changes were kind of subtle and then
Mhm.
accumulated to be like major changes, but emotional intelligence, I had zero, zero, because I had been taught to be offended.
Mm.
I had been taught to react.
Yeah.
I had been taught that I was supposed to get angry over anything that was, the opposite of what I thought. And so had a very fragile ego, no emotional intelligence.
Mm.
And I know the answer to this next question I'm about to ask you, but I want our listeners to hear us both, discuss this. Um, in your opinion, now that I'm on this, trail of talking about emotional intelligence, and you've already brought it up, since during our talk here, But high IQ or high emotional intelligence? I mean, which one do you think serves a person best?
A beautiful question.
Mm.
And I want to be very intentional with how I respond to this. I think that it comes down to how a person defines success, which
Mhm.
is subjective and unique. The problem is, though, is that most people have adopted a version of success that was not something that they came up with themselves. They've defined success based on what other people have said, what they see other people have, that jealousy, that envy, that desire for what you don't have. And so they have this idea that what they want, right? That version of success, they have an idea of it, but they haven't actually taken the time to define it for themselves, as particularly as it pertains to the season of life that they're in. And the reason I think that this is so hard to define, because my inclination is to say emotional intelligence, right? And the reason but I think we need to clarify why, is that most people, they misunderstand success and fulfillment. They think that they're the same, or they think that they're like completely separate. And in my opinion, they are two sides of the same coin. You can be extremely successful. So we go back to our Elon Musk example. I believe that the man has an extraordinary IQ, an
Mhm.
extraordinarily low EQ. He
Mhm.
is wildly successful, but there is nothing in my life that wants to be like that man. I can have
Right.
respect for him. I have admiration for him. He has literally changed the fabric of our world with his
Mhm.
IQ.
Yeah.
But you look at his relationship with his kids, you look at his divorces, you look at all of the relationships in his life, you look at how people have shared for years about how he interacts and leads and things like that. Now there's not a doubt in my mind that he's great at inspiring people and putting people into the right positions to accomplish a major goal. But when I don't, and I wish him all the best. I'm not trying to call Elon out. So Elon, if you ever
Sure.
listen to this, love you, dude. Let's have a conversation. But um, part of the empath inside of me looks at Elon Musk and I hurt for him,
Mhm.
because I think that he is tremendously successful, but he's missed fulfillment.
Mhm.
And I think the reason that that is such an important distinction for us is that there are a lot of people that are convinced that if they were just smart enough, if they were just capable enough, just skilled enough, develop their IQ, develop their knowledge base, develop their understanding, that they will get what they want to get. But the irony here is this, is that for everything that we desire in life, whether it's the house, the car, the business, the marriage, the beach cabana, the Swiss chalet, whatever, get whatever thing that you think that you want. If you really drive down to the core that is behind those desires, it's because we want to feel a certain way.
Mhm. That's right.
We're chasing a feeling. Status, right? It's because we want to feel a certain way. Power, we want to feel a certain way. Wealth, we want to feel a certain way. And so when I started to dive into this, I started to realize, like, whoa, 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 whoa. If everyone's ultimately after feelings, then I should probably learn how to master these. I
Mhm.
should probably learn how they affect me. I should probably learn like what degree of control they have. I should probably learn where they come from. I should probably learn how to handle them. I should probably learn, like, how my emotions affect me, how my emotions affect my kids, how my emotions affect my wife, how my emotions affect and so this obsession with emotional intelligence like overtook me to where I started to realize, oh my gosh, everything that we're chasing in life, if it's just a feeling, the question I wanted to answer, Paula, was this: what if I could feel all of that now without my circumstances changing?
Mhm.
What if I could feel the feeling I want to feel by having the thing now without actually having the thing?
Mhm.
And what that did is it brought me to this place where I realized that most of us have been conditioned to believe that our external circumstances and our conditions in life, the things we own, the people around us, all this other stuff, is what determines how we feel. And
Mhm.
there's a great book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, that unlocked this for me. He was a man who lived through the concentration camps. He was a psychologist, and he actually studied while he was there as a prisoner. He studied the lives of those men who made it through versus those who gave up. And there was an interesting part he talks about that you could literally see on the face of a man when he had given up the will to live, and it was a definitive fact that within 24 to 48 hours he would be dead
Mm.
because he had given up. And so this key that was unlocked by that book, Man's Search for Meaning, because that's what we want. We want purpose. We want meaning. We want to feel valued. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. We want to be loved. Like all of these things derive from feeling and emotion. And so to me, emotional intelligence is exponentially more valuable because you then don't need to have the high IQ and this and this and this and this in order to cultivate. You can't manufacture them. This is an organic process. You have to cultivate and plant those seeds and develop that emotional intelligence to where you come to the point where what you thought you once wanted, you realize like, I don't actually really want that because all I wanted was the feeling, and I can have that feeling now. Wait, I can have peace now. I can have joy now. I can feel successful now. I can feel wealthy now. And that's, I think, the key. It's been the key for me is that I had to feel it first. I had to believe it first so I could become it. And a lot of people misunderstand this because they think, well, I'm just going to fake it till I make it. No, if you fake it and you manufacture it, your vibrational frequency will be off. The literal electromagnetic frequency running through your body will cause all of us who actually have it to avoid you because we know you're faking, and you won't be able to attract into your life the things that you want because it's all magnetism. You have to become it by believing it first. And I think you may disagree with me, Paula. I'd love your thoughts on this too, because I know this is your world as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I had to switch from faking it to authenticity. And part of that was increasing my emotional intelligence and admitting what a low level of control that I had over my emotions. I mean, admitting was a big thing for me. I mean, I had to admit a lot of things about myself and own it, and then not necessarily focus on those perceived weaknesses, but just kind of see how I could turn those into something that would benefit me and that I could learn from. And so that was part of, that was part of my process with increasing my emotional intelligence, because I had gone, my whole life pretty much faking it because and you said something earlier that, we aren't always taught how to effectively communicate our needs and our wants. Well, I kind of wasn't allowed to.
Yeah.
And so you'd see, I always had this big smile on my face, but I was usually dying on the inside. And that's faking it.
Yeah.
And so when you fake it in your personal life, then you're gonna fake it in your professional life. You're just gonna be faking it everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I had to switch out of that and into authenticity. And it wasn't easy, but I would not have been able to have done that if I hadn't admitted what was going on,
Yeah.
stopped playing the victim, stopped blaming, realizing what my relationship actually was with God, this person that had been personified my entire life, and not focusing so much on the external circumstances, because everything about me was determined by what was going on externally. And then when I went within and started focusing on me and who I really was and what I really needed and what I really wanted, then things changed. And I started to see all those external things differently. Because at the beginning of my spiritual journey, I immediately jumped into trying to manifest money.
Yeah.
And I had
I
no
think that's where
idea.
most people start. They're like, I want to manifest more money.
Right, because I thought that would be the key to everything. I mean, if I had money, then I could, solve this problem and that problem and that problem and that problem. Now, yes, I needed money at that time, no doubt about that. I needed it desperately, but that was not going to be the answer to my problems. If somebody would have handed me $10 million when I had low emotional intelligence, it would have been gone.
Yeah,
And
the data doesn't lie. The science doesn't lie. Anyone, questions that can just look at what the stats are for people that win the lottery.
oh my gosh.
And what
It's
happens 3 to 5 years after they win it? It's gone.
it's gone, and it's all external. It's
Yep.
all ego driven.
Yep.
It's all of that.
Yeah.
And so emotional intelligence has been a monumental
Mhm.
like change for me. It changed everything. And when people talk to me about, I can't attract what I want, I'm doing all this, I've done the vision board, I've done this and I've done that.
Yeah.
And I want to very gently say, but are you still like getting offended at everything? Are you still
Mhm.
complaining? Are you still talking about being broke? I mean, are you still like having road rage or, all of those things? Are you still fighting with your family and your friends and reacting to everything?
Yeah.
Because when you have no control over your emotions, then it trickles down and it's going to affect every aspect of your life because you go day to day again on autopilot and you
Mhm.
usually don't feel well. And when you don't feel well for extended periods, that is going to manifest into
Yeah.
sickness and
Mhm.
toxic people, places, and things. That's all there is to it. And so that's why I'm such a huge advocate of really trying to get people to work on that versus just jumping into
Yeah. Well,
other.
I love that. If I could interject something, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening that are like, yeah, but how? Like, how do I develop my emotional intelligence? Because that's the question that we often ask. And I love that you advocate for starting with that first, because uh, if we were to get super nerdy and scientific and look at all the way down to the atomic molecular level of
Mhm,
vibration and attraction and magnetism and how the body works and everything like that, this is all like natural law that's a reflection of spiritual law. Like they're
mhm,
principles that when you can understand the principles and you can start practicing, you literally can't fail. Like it's just it's the law. Like it is
mhm,
natural law, it is spiritual law. If you follow the principles, you cannot, I think I love that, scripture talks about, planting seeds, right? And I don't remember exactly what seed it is, but it's like if you plant this kind of seed, it's not like you plant an apple tree, you're not going to get oranges, right?
mhm,
If you'll
mhm,
just apply the principle, you plant the seed, you cultivate it, you take care of it, you water it, you nurture it, and you're patient, you will
mhm,
reap the harvest from it, right? And so
mhm,
I love that you prefaced it by saying that emotional intelligence is so important at the beginning. But then people ask me all the time, like, well, how do I actually do it? And the most effective way that I have found, this comes from two different books. One is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, fantastic book, and then Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And these two books, basically, to oversimplify for us, but I think the oversimplification is often what we need because the
mhm,
simple things confound the wise, and a lot of us are too smart for our own good. Is all you have to do is just start looking at your reactions to life.
mhm,
Just start studying how you typically are. Just start, like, if you want an actual practice on how to develop your emotional intelligence, at the end of every day, take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and sit down with a journal and go back through every single interaction that you had from the moment you woke up. What was your default to addressing your spouse first thing in the morning? What was your default when you got in the car and you drove to work? How did you feel? What were you thinking? What was your default when you interacted with your team? Because when you can start assessing your default mode, your reactions to life, you'll start to identify, like, oh, whoa, like I don't really like this. I don't like
mhm,
that I'm doing this. This is just what I'm doing by default. And that's that autopilot that we talk about, that you
mhm,
talked about earlier. And then when you start paying attention to your reactions to life, you become aware. And awareness is one of the most important things, because once you become aware, you've now taken on a different perspective. Just like if you're
mhm,
looking at a painting and you look over here on the left versus on the right, you have a different perspective. If you're down in the valley versus on the mountaintop, it's the same valley, it's the same painting, it's just a different perspective. And so when you
mhm,
can become the observer of your life,
mhm,
of your reactions to life, you become aware of how you're reacting, it gives you this awareness and understanding of what you have the power to change and what you don't have the power to change. Or in other words, you could say, what can I control that's within my control?
Mhm.
What am I trying to control that I was never created to control? Those
Mhm.
two things put together, they are the summation of our life and our experience of reality. And all of our feelings simply come up because of what we're thinking about that reality.
Oh, yeah, awareness, I think, is the foundation for all change,
I would agree.
and until I became aware of how I was reacting and feeling and thinking, I wasn't able to really make any changes at all, and so awareness came from working, that came from working on my emotional intelligence, and we've touched on family quite a bit and how we react.
Mhm.
And just kind of piggybacking and on what you just said, I just want to take this a bit further because during our intro talk a few days ago, you said something brilliant, and I wrote it down as you were talking. You said that a man's wife is his biggest journey. And
Mm.
that popped in my head when you made the comment about Elon Musk and his relationship with his family.
Mhm.
And so I would love for you to elaborate on that just a bit.
Yeah, another way that I like to say it is that, um, husbands out there, your wives are the greatest adventure you will ever have. And what's interesting to me, and we've seen these become more and more popular over the years. Book talk on TikTok, Paula, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
You've got the book talk ladies, and they
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, yeah.
there's this massive rise in popularity, over probably the last really, I'd say 20, 30, maybe 40 years in, the romantic type novels that are the adventure, the shows like the Outlanders, or these shows and movies that just a lot of guys would label as these sappy chick flick type things. But really what they are is that it's the full spectrum of human emotion that is being presented in a book or in a movie. And so, because women just have a tendency of being more in tune with emotions and have more emotional beings, it's a beautiful gift of what I think every woman should be sharing with the world. Us guys need to take notes. Is that you look at adventure that happens
Mhm.
through those books and through those stories. And when you look at adventure, none of us want to watch a boring movie. They were born, they had a silver spoon, they grew up, conquered the world in the end. No
Mhm.
one's going to watch that story. No one's going to watch that freaking movie. Like, no,
Right.
thank you. Like,
Because no one can relate to it.
they're like, no, give me like in the first 10 seconds, this horrible inciting event, like something catastrophic and bad. And then it's like the ups and the downs. And it's like, they get to the top of the mountain, they conquer the mountain and find out there's a freaking dragon there or whatever it is, right? You've got this adventure that is full of heartbreak and betrayal and pain and difficulty and suffering and conquering and winning and beautiful, like the full spectrum of human emotion.
Mhm.
And I think that's what most guys misunderstand about their wives,
Mhm. Mhm.
is that that is who she is. And when you can appreciate her as that adventure, you will be able to navigate the ups and the downs, the ins and the outs. And this is what I use a visual example, especially when I'm working with guys, because I had to learn this the hard way. I believe that women are very much like the ocean. And the ocean has moods.
Mhm.
Guys think that, well, she should be able to control her emotions all the time. And why is she this? And then, yes, this, and all the ups and downs are. And I don't think it's ironic that for thousands of years, sailors have spoken about the ocean as a woman, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And as a man, I believe that a man is very much like a stone wall, that when the ocean is interacting with this stone wall, sometimes it's that very gentle lapping. It's very like calm and serene and peaceful and beautiful. And sometimes it is a freaking hurricane. But what most men make this mistake of is, instead of standing in his strength, his solidarity, his fortitude, part of what allows a woman to be whoever she is, if he can stand there and withstand it all, he will find that this beautiful adventure of life it's complementary. You have this
Mhm.
solid mass and you have this liquid energy, this
Mhm.
ocean. But the
Mhm.
mistake that most men make, I believe, Paula, is this, is that most men are not stable enough in their own identity and their own foundation that they do one of two things. As that stone wall, they either fall in and crush her and
Mhm.
dominate her, or they become a pushover and they cave and fall backwards.
Mhm.
They can't withstand the beating of the waves against him. And so again, he will crumble and crush her because he does not have security within himself. And we see this in the form of abuse, of guys dominating their wives,
Mhm.
control like that. But then you also see the other side, which culturally we might call emasculation, right?
Mhm.
Is that he becomes emasculated because she overtakes him and he's constantly just falling backwards, when what she wants is to be able
Mhm.
to dance and be who she is. And as a man, when you can understand that she is the greatest adventure, what you're signing up for, if you want a book worth reading, if you want a movie worth watching, guess what? You signed up for the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mhm.
And so if you can't handle that, you're not a man. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say
Mhm.
it. You're a boy who is chronologically older.
Mhm.
And you have to come to this place where you realize that this woman, you're not meant to understand her from the beginning. Part of the understanding is spending the next 50, 60, 70 years learning her,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
she is the greatest adventure you will ever have. And I don't think that most men, unfortunately, Paul, I don't think that most men experience that, because most men aren't willing to focus on intentionally working on their own foundation themselves and become the men that they want to be, that they said that they would be. Instead, they're trying to live as people pleasers for their wives or kids and trying really hard to do all the right things and be all the right things, and
Mhm.
instead of saying, no, this is the man that I'm going to be, regardless of how my kids are, regardless of how my wife acts, regardless of. And I think that it's in that place where there's security and safety,
Mhm.
which I believe, and you're the woman here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what a woman wants. She
Mhm.
wants to be able to, whether she runs up and is just that hurricane beating against him, that he doesn't move,
Mhm.
and that she is going to have also those times where she is just gently kind of like the shore, just that gentle lapping up against him, which is what guys want, right? We just like,
Mhm.
and I think that if a man can understand who he is, that he is different than her, and both work intentionally on valuing those differences, it creates an extraordinarily beautiful adventure. But most people, they hit their first roadblock and they're like, peace, I'm out. I don't feel like I love you anymore. I don't feel like this is working anymore. And so their entire life is based on their feelings. And we could spend hours on this, but that's hopefully a long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
that's like a whole other podcast because I mean, I talk about this all the time. And before I met Will, my husband, and I didn't meet Will until I was 35. And then we were married. I was married for the first time in my life to Will at the age of 38. And so if you do the math, I mean, that put me out there in the dating world for a really long time. And it was a really cruel and brutal place to be because the person that I was when I was in the dating world was not the person that I was the time that I met Will. The person that I was when I was in the dating world was an insecure bit of a basket case who accepted a lot of abuse from men because that's all I knew. I thought it was normal. And so I tend, I just it was a train wreck. It was a total train wreck. And looking back, they were abusive to me because they viewed me as a threat.
Mhm.
And they were
Oh, yeah.
terribly insecure and ego driven. And when I stopped feeding their egos, then they stopped caring about me. And
Yeah.
so none of those men made any effort ever to really get to know me. They didn't.
Mhm.
And so when I met Will, it was more of a vibrational match because I had leveled up significantly and I had been, and in order to really do that, I had to be alone. And so when I met Will, I hadn't been dating anybody for a very long time. I had spent quite a bit of time alone.
Yeah.
And so when he came around, I was able to appreciate qualities in him that I probably wouldn't have if I'd met him 10 years prior, because I saw immediately that there was a security there and a confidence there,
Mhm.
and he had empathy, and there was a human component and an honesty and an authenticity I hadn't ever seen. Now, I had been envisioning this being in a relationship with someone like that for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And so then, bam, he shows up out of the clear blue. And it was a whole other experience because he wanted to get to know me.
Yeah.
And I sensed that right away. And so, and the two of us, I wanted to get to know him, the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And the empathy piece of this was profound. And I think that, and I don't mean to sound condescending, or I don't really know. I don't want to sound insulting to anyone, but I haven't in my world. I mean, I was raised in rural Appalachia,
Mhm.
hadn't encountered a lot of men that ever talked about empathy or really thought about it or showed it. And it's like not, it's just like they were just conditioned to be the opposite.
Yeah.
And I don't really think that a lot of people understand exactly what empathy is, but they sure don't understand what being an empath is.
Mm.
And so while I've got you here for your short little time that's left, I would love for you, because you openly say, I'm an empath. And I
Mhm.
don't think a lot of people understand what that is. So coming from a male perspective,
Yeah.
like, I would really like for you to talk about that for a minute.
I love this question, and it's not just in Appalachia; it's all around the world. Is that there is a hardwired thing inside of every single man that he does not want to appear weak.
Mhm.
That's one of our worst nightmares, is we don't want to feel helpless, we don't want to be weak, right? Weakness is directly an affront to our masculinity. That's why, like, even young boys, like, I've got two young little whippersnappers, and I was like, look how strong I am, daddy, look how fast I am. It's like, boys are just wired that way. It's like, I want to be strong, I want to be fast, I
Mhm.
want to be able to, like, do anything, see how big a rock I can pick up, and see how
Mhm.
far I can throw this tree branch or whatever it
Competitive.
is, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's a hardwired component, part of the giftedness, the beautiful gift of what man is to humanity, in the way that women have different gifts that men don't have. And what I struggled with is when I was a teenager, Paula, it was the first time that I took a series of personality tests, strengths assessment tests, and things like that. It was like 15, 16 years. I was probably 16, actually, the first time I took it. And at that time, I think it was a relatively newer one. It's very old now, but it was by Gallup. It was Clifton Strengths Finders. And the first
Oh, I
time,
remember that.
remember
Mhm.
that? Yeah, I took that for the
Mhm.
first time. And as a 16-year-old boy, mind you, at this point, soccer, football, basketball, tennis, golf, chorus, drama, every single, like, extracurricular, all of the clubs, like, I was in a band, like, the whole, I hunting, fishing, I mean, I was a boy.
Mhm.
And I just did all the boy stuff, right?
Mhm.
So when you think about what a 16-year-old, a lot of blood pumping, a lot of hormones, like, what he wants to get to find out what his strengths are, you're thinking like, oh, I'm motivator or combative, or I'm like, strategic, commanding, like these type of, what would be stereotypical, quote unquote, masculine characteristics. And so I get my assessment back, and the first thing at the top of the page says empathy. And I was like, shit.
I don't want to be
That's
empathetic.
that's what went through my head, though.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is freaking girly. Like, this is weak. Why would any man, like, I don't want empathy.
Mhm.
What in the world? Like, and so then I started going down the list, and it goes from empathy to includer. Oh, great, another girly one. I'm an
Mhm,
includer. Awesome.
mhm,
Then I went to, includers, connectedness. Oh, yay, another girly one. And so I go down this list, and basically everything I start like I associated all these characteristics with like feminine qualities, not masculine qualities. And so as a 16-year-old boy, I'm screwed up. Like there's something wrong. Like this is not okay. Like this is not good. This is not masculine. And what was even challenging for me back then too is that I was because of masking and being a part of all the groups and a lot of the trauma that was going on at home and whatnot, and identity crisis, is that I again, not having a strong masculine figure that I could look at and understand what it means becoming a man, etc. Um, I was just different in that I always associated with people that were 5 to 10 years older than me or older.
mhm,
So all of my
mhm,
friends in high school were in college or out of college. I really didn't like, I mean, I had maybe a couple of people, but that's also part of why I didn't end up going to college, because all of my friends graduated college. They said this is the stupidest thing that we've ever done, because none of them were going for a specific reason. Like, I believe in college. Go, if you're going to be a doctor, please go to college. I don't want a doctor that went to the school of hard knocks. Right. But
mhm,
culturally, the point being is that I had all of these older friends and older people that were, influencing me and my decisions. And I was trying to, to understand more and more about life at that point.
mhm,
And I started to really go through um, not only this identity crisis, but I just didn't make the same decisions as most of my friends. I didn't date in high school. I was the youngest freshman in high school. I was the only kid with a car at the end of my freshman year in high school, which made me kind of cool. That was awesome. But because I was different than what everyone else said I was supposed to be as a high schooler, that got back to my parents.
hmm.
And obviously my parents saw it and noticed it. And again, good kid, don't break any rules. I'm going to church. I'm on the worship team. I became the chaplain at my high school. Like, it's all these, oh, my apologies. I didn't
That's
realize that.
okay.
And I promise there's a point to this. There was a day that they pulled me into their room and they said, David, we just want you to know that we love you. Um, are you gay?
Mm.
And growing up in a very strong evangelical Christian background, like that was like the devil's mark, right? So for my
Oh, sure.
to make that assumption about me, all while I'm having identity crisis, I'm dealing with like the feeling like a lot like my dad, he ended up coming back for a short period of time and then they ended up getting divorced later on, like a couple years later, the stuff that happened with the youth pastor, like all of these things, to end up finding out as a 16-year-old 15 16-year-old boy that your top strengths are empathy, inclusivity, connectedness, like these very high emotionally driven strengths. That was really the first time that any type of suicidal ideation came into my mind,
Mhm,
because it wasn't until 10, 15, now almost 20 years later, I have an understanding that most of the language, if not all of the language that we have, the words that we use, they are laced with meaning, whether it's accurate or not. What I can
mhm.
say to one person, like if I was to come up to you, Paula, and cuss you out in French, if you don't know French, you're not going to know what I'm saying. It's probably not going to offend you or bother you. Right?
Right,
But the
right.
meaning behind
The
these words,
meaning.
to me, empathy, I grew up believing that that meant soft and squishy and like very emotional and just like super gentle. It was weak sauce. What
Right.
my 16-year-old version of me was like, oh, it's weak sauce, dude.
Mhm,
And so it was really over the course of that, really the last 10 to 15 years where my understanding and where fierce empathy came out of, because I feel like fierce empathy is a much better visual understanding of what empathy really can be in a useful context.
mhm,
And there's a beautiful story that I'll share, and I'll try and button up your question here. I know this is long-winded, but I struggled with empathy because to me it was associated with being vulnerable.
mhm,
And vulnerable was a weak word. It meant surrender. It meant you're soft, like you're not able to defend yourself. You're not strong. You're vulnerable, right? This
mhm,
is you're primed for attack, like bad. Like that's not the position I wanted to be in. And so I once heard a story about I was talking about this word, And it said, I want you to imagine that you're on the front lines. For any Lord of the Rings fans out there, just remember the Riders of Rohan going to Gondor's aid, and King Theoden, he's standing there with it, and he's running back and forth, they're getting ready to charge into the orcs and kill all the orcs and the Uruk-hai at Gondor. And we've all seen scenes like that where the king or the leader is there at the front, the ones that we respect and admire, and he's rallying the troops, king or queen, and they're there. And they are the first ones to take that step out and lead the charge.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, everyone behind them, there's this roaring cry, and you can feel the earth start to shake, and there's this shout. And I heard someone say this one time. He said that is the sign of a true leader. And I was like, of course, yeah, they went first. They were courageous. And they said, no. Yes, they were courageous. But in taking the first step and leading first and going out in front, by extension, you have become the most vulnerable. You have separated yourself from everyone else and voluntarily made yourself the most vulnerable person. So it is courage and vulnerability. I love how Brene Brown says it. She says that courage cannot exist without vulnerability because you are doing something you've never done before, and it terrifies you. And so for me, empathy, I started to construct this understanding of like, well, maybe it's not this soft, squishy thing. Maybe it's tremendously courageous. Maybe it's something that, and being an empath, even like from a kid, like feeling different things and a lot to do with animals and feeling and human beings. Like I could sit with somebody and I could literally read their mail without like not trying to be a weirdo. It was just like, yeah, you're feeling this and you're thinking this and this is what's going on. And then they just like stare at me like, are you, what was this, witchcraft? Like, no.
Right.
Just, and so all of this culminated to this place where my entire understanding of empathy shifted. And now how I define empathy is within the construct of fierce empathy. And it's creating an environment where you do whatever you can, whatever's within your power, for another individual to feel seen, heard, and understood. You create an environment where people feel seen, heard, and understood. Well, simultaneously, you have the courage to speak the hard truth in love, whatever that may be. And so for me, what that started to take on in form and in function in my life is that's why my clients have affectionately labeled me the fierce empathy coach over the years. A lot of times I'm in a coaching capacity, but a lot of times it's a combination with consulting. I work with a lot of business owners and helping them with these concepts. And this thing, fierce empathy, came out of some of my clients saying like, it feels like you create this environment where we know that we're loved. We know that you're on our side. We know that you are for us. We know that you're with us. We know that we're safe. But simultaneously, you say everything that we do not want to hear, but desperately need to hear. And so it's this weird discomfort that for me, empathy isn't just getting down in the pit and wallowing with people. It's like, I feel you, right? A lot of empaths do that because they don't understand that their gift, they have to learn to mitigate the weaknesses. There's a lot of beautiful strengths, but if you don't mitigate the weaknesses, it will overwhelm you. It'll overtake you. You will become emotionally dysregulated. You'll have to go disconnect and replug and recharge. And I started to learn that empathy was actually a tremendous superpower because it allows me to build bridges. It allows me to walk in places that people that are triggered and offended and like, hypersensitive to certain things, that I can go in places that other people can't. And I'm able to hear and understand and see from different perspectives. And I started to realize that is actually tremendously strong. It is tremendously safe. And it's also very, very dangerous. All of those to me sound like pretty masculine characteristics. And I started to shift my understanding that for me to be empathetic, a lot of guys say, yeah, pathetic. It's pathetic. Empathy is pathetic. And like, I can get that. I can understand why you'd see it that way. But the only reason that you feel that way is because you're scared of this. I'm not scared of this. I'm like, then why don't you do it? Because it's dumb. It's silly. You're scared of it. You're scared of being perceived that way. And I get it, because guess what? Most of us are terrified of it because we don't understand it. And most things that we don't understand, we're scared of. And so guess what? If you come up against something you're scared of, what do you have to do? you have to have courage.
Mhm.
You have to be vulnerable
Mhm.
in order for you to step into that and appreciate it and understand it and see it for the gift that it is.
Absolutely. And I will tell you that without empathy, I would not have been able to have forgiven one person,
Mm.
including myself.
Mm. Same.
And I had to be incredibly vulnerable to do that.
No.
And that empathy and that vulnerability together,
Mhm.
that was a winning combination. And it took me a very long time to forgive everybody that I needed to forgive. And, this is an ongoing process. I mean, I still have to do that.
Me too.
Right? I mean, because, not everybody is an energetic match and we're not going to like everybody. We can love everybody and still not like them. But with me, I would not have been able to forgive anything if I did not possess empathy. And so what you and I both do, you use that word superpower, and I had written it down right here in my notes to bring it up. Vulnerability has taken on a whole new meaning with me
Mm.
because vulnerability is a huge superpower. Just you and I being willing to share these gut wrenching stories, it helps people. And you got to be vulnerable to do that. And you've got to have massive courage to do that. And so I absolutely commend the work that you're doing, especially since you work with men. And so, Anna, just my last thing here, I would like for you to tell everybody, um, about your coaching model and how they can find you. And I will post all of your contact information with this episode.
Oh, thank you, Paula. Well, I appreciate that. And if I could share one little final thought with what you just said
Sure. Hmm.
about the vulnerability and the empathy is that for everyone listening, if there's anything that pertains to your emotions that you are scared of, it's literally an invitation. It's in like even stuff like anger. Like I want everyone listening, like, do you allow yourself to be angry, or do you think that it's inherently bad? Because anger is just an emotion.
Hmm.
There's a reason we have this full spectrum of emotion. We get caught up in this is good and this is bad. I'm allowed to feel this way. I just want to feel this way. I just want, whatever it is, right? And when it comes to these things that we're scared of, in my opinion, it is an invitation to lean into and to understand more and more that you have an opportunity to develop your intelligence, your emotional intelligence by assessing the thing that you're scared of. Now, you're going to have courage and you're going to
Hmm.
have to be vulnerable, but it doesn't mean that you are weak. In
Right.
fact, I think that it means that you're tremendously strong
Hmm.
because most people aren't. And especially you see this, I know you see this, Paul, like some of the hardest, stoic, like, thickest skinned people I've found, like if you really get in there with them, they're tremendously scared. And
Oh, absolutely. That's why they've got that mask on.
it's this hard shell. And when we start to do it, what we have to remember, this is what I want everyone to remember, is that that subconscious mind that we were talking about, it's just trying to keep us safe
Hmm.
and it's trying to keep us from pain. And it's because we've lived through pain. But understand, if you're going to experience the fullness of life, I'm sorry, but pain is part of it. You
Hmm.
have to be open to willing to have that adventure, not just with your spouse, but with experiencing life. The full spectrum of human emotion is that the reason we get so stuck, I think, is because of this emotional stuff, is we don't allow ourselves to feel that full spectrum. We're trying to protect against it, and it's just your subconscious.
Hmm.
Instead of leaning into it and allowing yourself to feel and experience life. And what I try and encourage people to do is this, is that I had a mentor of mine tell me once, he said that um, emotions are terrible leaders, but they are great supporting roles, right? So in effect,
Hmm.
it's like if you're constantly led by your emotion, it's very dangerous, very
Hmm.
dangerous.
Very dangerous.
But if you put them in the passenger seat and you let them ride shotgun, you can acknowledge them, you can talk about them, you can talk with them, you can have conversations, you can interact with them because they're a part of our experience of life. Just don't let them have control of the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in control of the wheel. And so that's what I hope will encourage everyone. And then to answer your question, yeah, Paula. So I do lots of stuff, and I have lots of fun. And so I am, inspired by you and your brand new book that's coming
Oh,
out,
thank
right?
you. Thank
And
you.
it's called The Thought Snob, if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
mistaken, right?
That's
And
right. Mm-hmm.
everyone listening, make sure you get on Paula's list. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot wait to get a copy of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that is inspiring to me is seeing you do this because I'm in the process of writing a book as well. And so I'm
Good for you.
very excited about that. And this season of life has been, I've been occupying the state of success that I've wanted. And it's been a redefining of what the next level looks like for me,
Mm-hmm.
which I want to encourage everyone here. I understand that your definition of success is going to change because you will become that. You will attract it. You will create it. And then you'll realize that, oh my gosh, I don't dream big enough.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's a new level and a new level. And so for me, I'm in a season of, I've got three beautiful babies. I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with them and my wife. And I'm loving life. I get to work with clients all over the world. Most of it's virtual, but I do fly different places depending. I also am a keynote speaker. I love speaking on these type of topics. If anyone has a stage and you're wanting a great speaker, if you like my approach, feel free to message me or my team. And then for men, yeah, I have a community called the Ardent Man, and it actually is an acronym. It stands for accountable, responsible, disciplined, empathetic, noble, and true. And every single day, week in and week out, we are focused on becoming better leaders, better husbands, and better fathers by operating from those core virtues. And we look at it's a 12-month program where we systematically take a man through a process of everything we talked about today, drilling down to what does he want, why does he want it, and who does he need to become to get it. And so we look at health, we look at relationships, we look at finances. And so that is a systematic process that I've developed over the years and the work that I've done. And so, in short, what I love to do is I love to help people to reclaim control, to restore their peace, and to cultivate that clarity, that purpose, and that passion in their life so that they can not only thrive in their business, they can thrive in their life. I'm not here to sell you any idea that you're not going to have suffering or pain. You're going to have suffering and you're going to have pain, and it's not going to
Mm-hmm.
be easy. But I do believe that we can cultivate, create, manifest everything that we desire if we will bring our lives into alignment. And that process is what I help a lot of people with, of how to practically do that in their habits, in their routines, in their time management, in their organizational structure, in their hiring and firing process, all of the things that go in and out of business and life. And that's what I love to do. And so I'm just here to serve, my friend.
Well, and I will tell you that there's nothing gimmicky about what you do. And I see so many people on social media, and it's gimmicky. And it's a lot of false promises.
Yeah,
It's a lot of guaranteed instant gratification,
right.
no self discipline.
Mhm.
And I
7 days
see
to a
that,
new you.
right. I mean, I see that a lot. But when I saw you, I mean, after listening to you for 5 minutes, I knew that there wasn't anything gimmicky about anything that you do. And so, with whoever's listening to us today, I highly recommend contacting David Waldy. He's the real deal. This conversation has been fabulous. I could talk to you for a year, and I don't feel like we would even scratch the surface. I mean, this conversation
I
has been
agree.
absolutely incredible, and I'm so grateful that you joined me today. Oh my goodness. And I'll just wrap up by saying what I stated at the beginning and what I state in every single podcast. Every guest I invite on the show is strategic, and I'm very, very picky. And because I want my listeners to leave my discussions with my guest with information, with knowledge, with tools, with contact information, or whatever it is that they need to help them level up, to help them get out of bad relationships, out of bad jobs. I mean, I'm always coaching people and like, you need to quit your job. I mean, don't conform, and I want to bring out the best in people. And so I feel like that our conversation has certainly done that. And I know that it will resonate with a whole lot of people, especially men. And so thank you. I can't thank you enough.
Paula, it's been absolutely an honor. Thank you for having me.
Hmm.
Thank you for sharing this. And I do hope
Hmm.
it blesses people. And I'm excited for your book. So you keep me posted, please. Okay.
I certainly will do that. And I will continue to follow you on social media. And I hope to see you soon one day,
In
maybe in
person, we're going to
person,
make it
right?
happen.
We'll make it
Absolutely.
happen, right?
I love it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
The Thought Snob Podcast with Paula Swope has been brought to you by Thought Snob Media in association with Special Purpose Studios. All production, mixing, and sound engineering by me, Will Swope. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please take a few seconds to give us 5 stars and leave a review. See you on the next Thought Snob Podcast with Paula Swope.